Hi, everyone. I have a couple of PowerPoints and lessons for you this week. This first one is on using sources. Primarily, I wanted to look at some plagiarism issues. So as you're taking notes, I'm hoping that your note taking will help you avoid plagiarism. So here's a few things you need to know. I will be using Turnitin, and Turnitin is a program that the university has purchased. It's basically a storehouse of all kinds of papers and databases that can check your submitted paper against anything that has been published in order to see how much of your paper is your own words versus words of others. Now, if you have properly quoted and cited something, it's fine if that turns up as not your own words. However, if there are passages in your research essay that are not cited and they're flagged as someone else's words, that would be considered plagiarism. Okay, I often get the question about, well, what if I'm using a source throughout the whole paragraph? Do I have to cite after every sentence? No, that is very cumbersome. I would say try to avoid whole paragraph from one source. This is not typically an academic move as you want to integrate multiple sources. But there is a way of doing it correctly, and that would be what is called the book ending, where you introduce the source, you use author tags, you connect with transitions, and then you cite at the end. And we've done a little bit of this with your summary essays. Okay, so here's an example. This particular source, as you see, comes from Williamson. And the whole paragraph actually draws from this source. So you notice the first sentence is the author's own words. Frogs are an excellent indicator species to measure wetland health. Immediately following, you have the introduction, according to a recent study by Williamson, 2010. So everything that follows, you know, is going to be from Williamson. Notice the next sentence starts with the study notes. This is that author tag or source tag that you're looking for to connect. Now, it could get repetitive to keep referring to Williamson. So if you use transition phrases, in addition, I would also be clued in as a reader that you're continuing to talk about this source. Now, when you end, that's where you put the citation. So notice you've got bookends, and that's how you would do a longer citation or paraphrase from a source. All right, unsuccessful paraphrasing and quoting. Obviously, when you use word for word and you don't quote it, patchwork paraphrase is very common in student writing. I'm going to show you an example of what it means to patchwork paraphrase. This is also not acceptable in academic writing. You may have been used to doing this where you kind of fill in a synonym here or there, but basically use the author's same words. It's not actually true paraphrasing. There's also structural paraphrase. That's where you take the author's ideas in the order that the author has written them. Like, let's say you're taking 3 sentences and paraphrasing those, and you're using basically the same structure without acknowledging the source. And then dropped quotes. This is where you have no introduction or integration of the quote. You simply start the sentence with a quotation mark and end. So we'll look at a couple of examples just so that you know what not to do, and then we'll talk about successful ways of integrating. Okay, So here is an example of using an original passage and doing patchwork plagiarism. Notice it's not word for word. So despite its origin in scientific research and educational pursuits, it did not take long for marketers, advertisers, and public relations practitioners to find the internet. Notice how similar the wording is, though, here. Although it was originally used in scientific research and education, marketers, advertisers, and PR people quickly found the internet. There's a lot of overlap between that. This is structural plagiarism, it's patchwork plagiarism. In the next line, they were happy to discover a medium that was mostly unregulated. Notice more than a decade later, the web remains at least the least regulated of all mass media. Here, although there was a slowdown a few years ago due to the dot-com bust, here, although the dot-com bust of the early 2000s slowed the commercial expansion of the web. So this type of plagiarism is just taking words and reordering them or putting synonyms in, but you're basically going sentence by sentence, same structure, almost the same wording. This is not correct paraphrasing. This may be how you have thought of paraphrasing in the past, but it's not. Paraphrasing is completely using your own words to say what the original passage said. So here's an actual example of paraphrase. As Ebersol notes, although the internet began as a non-commercial medium, its relative lack of regulation quickly made it attractive to businesses. See, I took the ideas here and put it in my own words. Despite some ups and downs, especially in the, quote, dot-com bust of the early 2000s, unquote, commercial use of the web is now all pervasive. So how do you avoid patchwork plagiarism? My one biggest tip is, as you're reading the original source, I want you to look at what it says and then look away from it and type in your own words what you would say the source said in your your note tracker. When you try and paraphrase while you're looking at or reading the original source, it is so much easier to patchwork plagiarize. So if you don't understand what the source is saying, that's another problem. You're like, well, I don't know how to paraphrase it. I don't know how to say it in my own words. That may indicate to you that you don't really know what the source is saying. So you need to read it again and try to say it in your own words. Now, if you just can't say it in your own words, the way they've said it really can't be changed, that's when you would use quotes. And in the next video, I'll talk more about how to use quotes. But do take advantage of paraphrasing. You don't want to overquote. In fact, putting more of the source's ideas in your own words shows a level of sophistication in your ability to digest information.